Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, DeSean Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
Rube, we're here. This is the final podcast of 2020.
Really?
Well, unless on Thursday they fire Doug Peterson, then we'd have to do one and squeeze one last. Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to be the final Eagle Eye podcast presented by Nissan of 2020.
But next year we're going to do a live podcast from Times Square on New Year's Eve.
No, we are not. In just a few minutes here, we will bring in Ray Didinger, get into some big picture stuff with him because there's a lot to get into. And then at the end, we will kind of give you some reasons to watch this game on Sunday. Believe it or not, there are real reasons to watch this game. It doesn't mean anything for the playoff standings, at least for the Eagles, but plenty of reasons to watch, and we'll get into those. But first, Drew, I wanted to start off. You had a piece yesterday on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com looking at some Eagles, some great all-time Eagles who might be finishing their careers, who we expect to be finishing their careers with the team this year. I want to just go through some of those guys because some of them, I mean, you're not going to miss because they're past their prime, but we're talking about like all-time great players here.
Yeah, a couple of guys who are going to end up in the Eagles Hall of Fame without question. I think DeSean and Ertz are the kind of two big names. Let's start with Zach Ertz. I really do think because of the cap savings, which is over $5 million. Since he went public with his contract frustration, everything seemed to kind of spiral downhill for him. He didn't get off to a good start catching the ball. He never really got integrated in the offense. Then he got hurt, and he comes back and he caught a couple passes last week, but it just doesn't seem, with the cap savings, his age, his frustration with his contract and going public with it. Goddard, who is, a legit, probably didn't have the year I thought he would have. He was hurt too. But I think he's a younger guy. He's a cheaper guy. I just think it all kind of adds up to Zach Ertz being elsewhere next year.
Yeah, it was a shame he didn't play well down the stretch because he really could have helped himself. He could have helped the Eagles. Because right now, I mean, I don't know what they're going to get back for him in a trade. His value has really plummeted this year. Yeah,
it's a great question. Trades are weird. You just never know, especially for older players. Teams aren't lining up to give away a 2 or a 3 for a 30-year-old, tight end who's coming off the worst year of his career, and wants, or at least at one point wanted, Kittle and Kelsey money, or close to it. I'm sure he wishes now he had accepted what the Eagles offered him. I'm sure the Eagles are relieved he didn't. He's not going to get anywhere near that. There's a chance they might have to cut him, but I think they will find a trade partner and get something for him. But I don't think he'll be here.
Yeah, and any team that trades for him is probably going to want an extension to lower that cap hit immediately because, he's not worth – he came into this year underpaid. He's leaving it way overpaid.
That's true. And, he'll never get the money he wanted. I mean, he turned down – well, we don't know the exact numbers, but, I believe he turned down, close to somewhere around $9 million a year. I think something like that. He's not going to, the Eagles are kind of lucky on that one. And, Zach's one of my favorite guys, but you got to call it like you see it. And he's just not the player he was. Maybe he'll go somewhere else in the right system with the right quarterback. And tight ends can play well into their 30s, but it's not going to be here. DeSean, I still think there's a chance DeSean will be back. I think it would be a mistake. You saw, I think
really? They can't do that, can they?
On a cheaper deal, like if I don't think he'll be back on his current contract, but I think they might look at their wide receivers, their young wide receivers, Fulgham, Rager, Quez, Hightower, J-Jaw, that whole group, and say none of those guys proved anything. And you look horrified.
I am horrified.
I certainly wouldn't do it. But they might look, 81-yard touchdown, But you kind of saw both sides of Deshaun in that game. I mean, he did score an 81-yard touchdown, which nobody else on this team can do. But he got hurt, and he always gets hurt. And he's going to be 35, right? Maybe 34. I certainly wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be shocked. You know how this franchise gets. And again, a lot of it, if Howie's not here, certainly Deshaun won't be here. But Howie gets fixated on keeping these guys too long.
Like they're turning into the Flyers in front of our eyes here.
No, I don't. I certainly wouldn't do it. But I do think he's more likely gone than not. But I do think there's a chance that they would offer him a much, much cheaper deal and he would accept. Malik Jackson's an interesting one to me because there's not a huge cap savings. It's only $1 million, but I just don't think I don't think he fits into what they want to do. It's a lot of dead money, but he's been a real disappointment. He got hurt early last year, didn't play. Got off to an okay start this year. Not a great start, but he was making some.
I'd say pretty good start. I thought early first couple games, he had the most pressure of anyone.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. He hasn't really done anything really since the bye or even before that. I just don't feel like he's a good fit here. And I think with Hargrave and Fletch, you can cobble together the rest of a D tackle rotation. I don't think cap savings is really the sole reason. I just think that he's underachieved.
Can you trade him?
I doubt it.
Late round pick?
He's another one who's older. He's got a huge contract. Maybe, but I just don't. I feel like he's not going to be here.
How about give me one more name on that list?
Well, I didn't even put Jason Peters on there because I thought that was obvious. But I'll give J-Jaw because J-Jaw, obviously, there's no real harm in keeping him because, he will save you actually close to $1 million. He's still on a rookie contract, but it was a second-round rookie contract. But do they give up on a guy? He's only 23. Do they give up on him this quick, or do they bring him back? Even if he has a good training camp, he's not going to play well in the season. So, why would you bring him back? It'd be really unusual to give up on a second-round pick after just 2 seasons. There's no reason not to keep him unless you just don't want him around the team. I don't think he's a bad guy.
There's no reason to keep him either.
I agree. That's why I have him on the list. But knowing them, it's embarrassing to cut a second-round pick after 2 years, and they might just keep him.
They've done it, though. Think of Jaquan
Jarrett. He got cut in the middle of his second year.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, Andy took the hit for that one. I just screwed up that one. But,
and then Jaquan, to his credit, went on to have a couple of decent seasons with the Jets. Decent. He was better than he was here.
He started some games. He was player of the week one week. He had his entire career boiled down into one game. He had forced a fumble, had a sack, had 2 interceptions. He never did anything before or after. Kind of like Ray Farmer did that as well. He's player of the week. He had a terrible career though, and he had a worse career as a GM, but that's another story. But yeah, I just don't think he'll be here. I think they want to move on with these other kids. The fact that he's 23, he can't even suit up at this point at the end of his second season kind of tells you that, if they believed in him, they'd want to see him with Ertz. They'd want to see, this is a time where you want your young guys out there. Now, maybe he'll play Sunday because Deshaun's probably going to be hurt again or something. But
what if J-Jaw has a great game and it prevents the Eagles from a top 5 pick?
I would go over really well in Philly, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I had the flip side of this. Doug Peterson earlier this week, as he was on the campaign trail, basically said, I asked him if do there need to be major changes? And he actually said he thinks they have the pieces, the makings of a foundation of getting this thing back on track. Well, I looked at the roster, Reuben. They really don't. I tried to pick the real keepers, the guys you can really kind of hang your hat on. And half of them are
really
over
short
30.
article.
I mean, like here. So here are the names I came up with: the over 30 guys: Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Jason Kelsey, Darius Slay, Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks, Rodney McLeod. Three of those guys are coming off serious injuries. One of them might retire, and the other two of them, and the other three have cap hits of like 15 million next year.
Yeah,
I mean that's not great. And then the under 30 guys, this is where it really gets depressing. And Dallas Goedert, Javon Hargrave, Jordan Mailata, Jalen Reagor, Miles Sanders, Isaac Seumalo, Josh Sweat, Alex Singleton.
It's 8 guys. It's 8 guys, and yeah, and
like, I put Reagor on there because he's a first-round pick, not because we've seen it.
Right. And who's the best out of that group?
Miles.
There's no Pro Bowler in that group. Nobody's ever made a Pro Bowl in that group. And there's questions about all of them, frankly. I mean, I think Hargrave really showed this the last month. I think he's only 27. I think of him as being older. He's only 27. I think he's pretty good. I think he's really good. And I think that also factors into my thinking on Malik, that Hargrave's,
better
blossoming has kind of made Malik extraneous. But yeah, that's not an impressive group. Go through that again. Singleton, Hargrave, Reagor, Sanders, Goddard,
Mailata, Seumalo, still under 30. He's the most solid of this group, I guess.
Seumalo, yeah. And I think Mailata's going to be – I think he's going to be a really solid left tackle. I think he will be the left tackle next year.
I didn't put Dillard on the list because –
yeah, who knows?
Yeah. It's a depressing list.
It is a depressing list, and that's Howie. That's all on Howie. And you could add Fulgham to that if you buy into the 5 games he had. I think they'll. I think he's got a chance to be a player, but who knows? Who knows who or what he is? Yeah, it's Avonte Maddox. I don't think. Yeah, he doesn't belong on the list. How about like Cravon?
I love Cravon. We all love Cravon. He doesn't belong on the list.
Yeah, you're right. Richard Rodgers, 28.
You want me to put Richard Rodgers on this list? It's not a softball list. I mean, he's okay.
He's a hell of a softball player. I think if you move on from Ertz, then Richard Rodgers, if he's your second tight end, you could do worse than that. I'm trying here.
Want me to put Josh Perkins on the list?
Richard Rodgers is better than Josh Perkins. I'm trying here. I'm trying to get it up to 10. But I think Quez showed some things the last couple of weeks. He's got a shot, but certainly doesn't belong on the list yet.
Yeah.
It's all Howie. That's Howie. That list is Howie. That list is damning proof that Howie Roseman should not be the GM of this team. Period. At Nissan, we just made your choice for a new car an easier one than ever with our most exciting and fuel-efficient lineup. The choice is all yours. Now get great offers across our full line. Shop your local Nissan store today at nissanusa.com.
Joining us now on the Eagle Eye podcast, as he does every week, our good friend Ray Didinger. Ray, how are you?
I'm good, Dave. How are you doing?
We're doing well. In a way, we're kind of happy that this season is winding down. We don't have to try to pretend that this is a playoff team anymore.
Right.
It's funny, Ray, the whole idea of having you on every, Thursday during this year was that we would preview the upcoming game. And about halfway through the season, we just had to abandon that because this team was just so bad. Let's start looking back. Overall, how big of a shock was this, that this happened to this team this year?
Well, I certainly didn't see this coming. I don't know anybody that did. I certainly didn't see them. I certainly didn't see them fall into last place in this division. I mean, I thought that at the start of the season, I thought that the Washington would still be Washington, the Giants would still be the Giants, and they'd be fighting it out at third place, fourth place, and the division would come down to the Eagles and Cowboys. and one of them would win and the other one would finish second. And the whole thing kind of reversed itself. And we came down to a situation where last week it was the Eagles and the Cowboys playing, but they were playing to avoid last place rather than fighting for first. I didn't see it coming. I certainly didn't see the implosion of Carson Wentz. I didn't see that coming at all. You know, I was thinking last night when I was writing my little thing for the notepad, I sort of went back to the fact that, you know, this season is bookended by the two Washington games. It starts with Washington, it ends with Washington. And you think about how that game in Washington began with that opening drive where the Eagles just march right down the field and Wentz hits Ertz and they're up 17-0. And it looks like it's going to be a typical Eagles-Washington game. It's going to be ho-hum, Eagles win, Washington loses, on we go. And everything looked just so easy in that first half. And then Wentz throws that interception, Washington scores right before halftime, and the whole season just goes straight downhill from there. And here we are, you know, in December, last week of the season, and they're playing Washington again. And it's Washington that's playing for a chance to go to the playoffs, and the Eagles stuck in last place. I've been covering this team a long time, but I've never seen a season that sort of took such a U-turn like that one did. And, you know, the fact that you're finishing it up with Washington this week just sort of refreshes that in your mind of how this season looked when it began compared to how it looks now.
I thought the Dallas game was really similar to the Washington game, and you know they looked so good early. They had a 10-point lead. They ended up losing both games by double digits. They became the first team since the 1984 Jets to have two games in a season where they led by 10 points after the first quarter and lost by 10 points or more, which is hard to do once, and they managed to do it twice, both times against division opponents. And you know, you hold a couple 10-point leads, you're going to the playoffs. But it's amazing that first half against Washington was the best half they played this year.
Yeah,
first half of the first game. You know, you're supposed to get better as the season went along. I'm with you. I mean, I watched. It kind of reminded me of Chip Kelly's first game, which was against Washington, and they had a big lead, and they were going 100 miles an hour in the first, and you know, and then that ended up being the best half of Chip Kelly's career here. So it's funny, and Washington was the common opponent, but I thought Dallas and. I thought there was disparity between Dallas and the Eagles and the other two teams in the division, and I might turn out to be right. I just, like you said, it was all backwards. This division has always been so. You know, every time you think, well, finally, for the first time since 2003 and 2004, somebody's going to repeat in the NFC East. It's been 16 years now, and it hasn't happened. It's a crazy division. It's a unique division. It's a terrible division, and the Eagles are the worst team in it.
Yeah, they are. And where you hit on Carson Wentz, which to me is the most surprising part of this entire season, because I could maybe see the other stuff. Like a bunch of injuries happened, sure. Doug looks clueless at times, maybe. But this franchise quarterback regressing to the point where he gets benched after 12 games, that never even crossed my mind. When you look back at his season, what do you make of it? And do you think he's fixable?
I do.
Question.
I do.
$100 million question.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think he is. And I think that my opinion is clearly a minority opinion now, and I understand that. I think he's still a real talent. I still think he could be salvaged. I don't think he's broken beyond repair. I mean, he's finishing this season healthy. He's not finishing with a major injury. And he's about just to turn 28. So athletically, he's in his prime. What happened to him this year is, I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like it. That a guy at this point in his career who had played so well in the past just looked like he forgot how to play. I don't know if I've ever seen that before. I've seen guys have bad stretches, but I've never seen a guy go from one of the very, very best at his position to the absolute worst in this period of time. Kind of unprecedented in my experience. And the feeling that I get is that that most of the fans in the city have moved on. I mean, they're ready to go with Jalen Hurts, and just whatever you have to do with Carson Wentz. If you eat the salary, you take the cap hit, whatever, move him on, because it's just not going to work for him here.
You clearly haven't visited my Twitter timeline lately.
I'm sure you're hearing it. I know I'm hearing it.
There's a lot of Carson believers out there.
Well, count me among them. Still, I think that it was hard. It was hard to watch what happened over the course of the season, and I was one of those people that kept waiting by the week that maybe next week it'll start to come back. And I really thought that in that stretch of games, especially the Baltimore game, the Pittsburgh game when he rallied them, then he beats the Giants on I really kind of there was the sight that, okay, this has been bad up till now, but he's finally found his way, and he's going to, coming out of the bye, everything will be kind of okay. And coming out of the bye, it just got worse, and it got worse by the week, to the point where even I agreed by the time of the Green Bay game, you had to make a change. I mean, it just clearly wasn't going to get any better. But I'm not prepared to write him off. I don't know if the organization is, but I'm not. In my notepad, my notepad thing that's going to go up on the website this week really deals about this whole issue, the whole quarterback issue. And I reference a guy who was an NFL general manager that I knew long ago, who had a very successful run. And we talked a lot about philosophy. And what he said to me, he said, I live by one rule, and that is you don't give up on talent. And I still believe that this guy has talent. And he's young enough that he can get back to where he was. I do believe that. I just don't know that he's going to get the chance in this town. I mean, it seems like the further along we go, and you guys may be hearing things different than I am, but it seems like the sense of it that I get is it's more likely than not he's not going to be here next year. And I'm not on board with that. I mean, I would bring him back, and I would let him and Hurts compete next summer at training camp, and may the best man win. But it seems like with each passing week and each conversation I have, that's becoming more and more unlikely.
Yeah, I think it makes sense too, and I'm with you on Carson. The weird thing is not really knowing what went wrong. Kind of makes it harder to fix. But it was just the 4 games before the bye. I think he had 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. It wasn't great numbers, but there was a sense that he was discovering something. They still, he was getting terrible protection, but he was, he didn't have weapons. But he was starting to look a little bit better. And then the bye came, and I thought the bye is a perfect time to kind of regroup, step away a little bit, and come back and build on those last few games. And then, like you said, it went the complete opposite direction. I still believe confidence is the biggest problem. I think there was a lot of issues, but I think, if you're a quarterback and you don't have confidence, you're not going to function. So I think there were a lot of factors that led to that: play calling, pass protection, drops, everything. But I do believe that if they can rebuild his confidence, which I think should be possible, then you might have something. I think he'll be here. I think he'll be the opening day quarterback next year. I just think your best chance to be an elite team in 2021 is with Carson. And it's not a knock against Jalen. I don't know exactly who he is or what he is. We'll maybe learn a little more Sunday, but I just don't. I'm with you. I don't think he'd give up on a guy who's done what he's done, not just 1 year, 2 years, but he had 3, really, really solid years there. 1 great year and 2 very good years. You just don't give up on that. It's too much of a body of work. It's not like he's 37 years old. It's not like he's a bad locker room guy. I just don't think you give up on him this quick. And if it doesn't work out, you make a change next year again. You go with Jalen and you see what happens. You might end up having to draft a quarterback in 2022, but I still think that your best chance, and I like Jalen, I like a lot of the things he's done, but I still think this team's best chance is with Carson.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think it was. I do think it was a confidence issue. I think it was a here issue, and I think at early in the season when the offensive line just completely fell apart, I think that's kind of where it started. I think he got to a point where he just didn't trust his protection. I mean, even times when you went back and you watched the game over again, you saw occasions where he actually did have some protection. He did have some room in the pocket, but he didn't believe it. You know, I mean, every play he was under duress, whether he was actually or not. In his mind, he was. Everything got hurried. His ability to see the field was gone, and he was trying, as uber competitors are, to try and make a big play on every play. And the combination of that desire to try and do that at the same time when you don't have any confidence in what's happening around you can get you into a really deep, dark place. And I think that's what happened with him. And then he just couldn't find his way out. It just kept getting worse and worse. And the whole season just kind of snowballed on him. But the one thing that I've tried to say before, and nobody seems to want to listen, but I hear it a lot when people talk about Wentz, is they talk about 2017 as that was the aberration. That, you know, that year that he had, yeah, he was good, but he hasn't been any good since then. I mean, I hear that a lot. You know, that he was after 2017, he was never that good. That's not true. It's really not true. I mean, if you look at the way he played, and even if you even look at the statistics, I mean, in 2018 he had a higher quarterback rating than he had in 2017.
Yes, he did.
And in in the following year, his quarterback rating was in the mid 90s. So the idea that he had 2017, but he's been lousy ever since, is very untrue. But there are a lot of people that kind of feel that way now. Look, nobody can excuse what happened this year. I mean, he was awful, and they gave him time. The coaches stuck with him, gave him 12 games, and okay, I think they had to make a change when they made the change. But this idea that that 2017 was some kind of an accident, I don't believe that. I think you can get that guy back, and you look around and you see. I mean, it's not an exact comparison, but I look at what happened to Ryan Tannehill. Drafted in Miami. They thought he would be the guy, had some success. They soured on him. They trade him to Tennessee. He gets a fresh start in a new situation. And for the last 2 years, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the league. We've seen the quarterbacks can reinvent themselves. And if Carson Wentz reinvents himself, I'd rather see him do it in Philadelphia than somewhere else.
Yeah, that's fair. And the question then becomes, who's the coach to get in there if they want to bring Carson Wentz back? And that's a big question right now, because after watching Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz for 12 games together this season, can they bring that duo back for 2021? I'm not sure.
Yeah. I really thought that Doug was okay before the Dallas game. Now I'm not so sure. I mean, that was such a bad performance on so many levels against what I still think is a not very good Dallas team. To go down there when you still theoretically have some life in your season, to go down there and lose by 20 to that team was pretty bad, and that was a really bad performance. I thought, going into that, I think Doug's going to survive this. Now I don't know. I mean, nobody knows what's going on in Jeff's mind right now. I mean, he's obviously taking all of this in. I mean, he's not Norman Bremen off in a villa in the south of France, far removed from this. I mean, Jeff's living it every day, and I'm sure he's very unhappy with where we are. My feeling all along, and we've talked about this a lot every week, is I still would be surprised if he fired Doug. I would. I just think that there's a part of Jeff that's going to say, listen, the year 2020 was a terrible year. This guy has been a good coach for us before. He's won a championship, which nobody else had done. I can't fire him on the basis of anything that happened this year. I got to give him at least next year to try and get it right. to me, that seems consistent with the way Jeff operates most of the time. I mean, he quick hooked Chip Kelly, but that was for a lot of other reasons. I think he genuinely likes Doug. I think they have a good relationship. I think he's more willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And so my feeling is, as upset as he probably is, and as distressed as he probably is, I think I still think Doug will survive. I may be proven wrong, but if he comes out and announces he's firing Doug, I'll tell you, I'll be surprised.
I think you're right, and I think that the fact that it was such an unusual and difficult year for everybody is going to play heavily into that. I think if this was a normal year, normal OTAs and meetings in person and all that, and they were 4-10-1, 4-11-1, whatever it turns out to be, I don't think he would look at it the same way. But I've been around Jeff a long time, and I mean, the way I know how he processes things and how he thinks, and I think the fact that this year has been such a strange and difficult year. I mean, Doug himself had COVID and missed, a week and a half of training camp. I think he'll give him another year. And, I don't know if you had a chance to see my piece. I went through every Super Bowl head coach. There's been 10 that got fired. And the only one who got fired within 6 years of winning the Super Bowl was Don McCafferty, when he wouldn't bench Johnny Unitas for Marty Domris, I guess it was.
Right.
And then like the whole Steve Mariucci Seifert thing was he resigned, but he was kind of forced to resign. That was kind of unusual circumstances, but it's really rare for a guy to win a Super Bowl. I think Gruden was the next fastest. He got fired 6 years after winning a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean it won't happen. And like you said, I mean, you lose to Dallas by 20 when you're fighting for a playoff spot, albeit a tainted one. That can change things.
Yeah, I agree. I did the same study, Rube. I went back a couple of weeks ago and looked back all the Super Bowl winning coaches, and from the time they won it, how long was it before they were removed or whatever? And yeah, McCafferty was like a year and a half. It was like no time. It's funny. I mean, you think about, like, it doesn't seem like Brian Billick was in Baltimore all that much longer after they won, but he got like 7 years.
Yeah.
I mean, if you win a Super Bowl, I mean, that gets you a lot of rope, I think. And the history of it, we're now 50 years into Super Bowls, and the history of it would tell you that. You had guys step away who retired or walked away for health reasons. Walsh did, Vermeil did, Madden did, Seifert did. A lot of guys will step away on their own.
Kubiak.
But Kubiak, exactly. But to be shown the door, that's only happened really the one time. And, and that was actually just a blow up with him and the general manager where they had an argument, and you're quite right. It was over the benching of Unitas. So that's even a different circumstance. So, Jeff doesn't seem to be the kind of guy. I mean, all those impulsive owners that we've had in the last half century, Jeff doesn't seem to be the kind of guy that fits the profile of somebody that's going to be more impulsive than they were. So, yeah, I think that Doug's going to be back. I don't know that that's going to be a popular decision. Probably won't be in a lot of people's minds, but I kind of think that's what's going to happen.
So, guys, we've talked about Carson Wentz possibly coming back, Doug Peterson possibly coming back. I think we understand that Howie Roseman has a really tight connection with Jeff Lurie, and I think most people expect him to be back. So here we are. The Eagles are having this awful season, and we're setting up this scenario where they run it back. How does that happen, and what other changes can they make to kind of counteract that? Because if we're talking about running it back from this season, it seems like a nightmare.
You're right. And if it plays out this way, and Doug is back, and Carson is back, and Howie is back, that's not going to sit well with the fans. I mean, this was a really, really bad season in multiple ways. And you see, and we've talked about the fact that I think that, I think Jeff will look at this as 2020 was this awful year where nothing was right and everything was off and there was no camp, and how can you judge? But if you look around the league, other owners haven't had that problem. I mean, you've had 4 coaches fired in season. You've had 4 or 5 general managers fired in season. So among his owner brethren, those guys aren't cutting anybody any slack because of 2020. They're already firing guys, and they're going to be more fired in a week's time still. But
they don't have the record of success that Doug has either.
No, they do not. And I think that Jeff is just different than those other guys. And I think the relationship he has with Doug is such that I think he's more than willing to give him another opportunity to square things away. That's just my feeling. Maybe we'll be proven wrong. But yeah, I think Doug's going to be back. If it were up to me, I would bring Carson back. And normally a season like this would seem to mandate sweeping change. But I just don't see it happening here. The front office situation may be the one that bears the closest watching. Like, I don't think Howie's going to get fired. Again, I think it speaks to his relationship with Jeff. But I definitely think that they need to reorganize their front office. And I think they definitely need to reevaluate and reorganize their scouting operation and their personnel department. Because if you look at this team and you look at this roster, I mean, it's bad. You know, and I know there were injuries. I know that was part of it. But it's a bad team. I mean, it's a bad team, and it's a bad team that's been built over time. Now, the bottom completely fell out this year, but it was trending this way for a long time. I mean, you have as many bad drafts as this team has had over this many years. This is what you're going to wind up with. And somebody has to be held responsible for that. And I mean, it falls under Howie right now. And I don't think it's going to cost him his job, but it certainly should make Jeff say, we have to change the way we're scouting players, and we have to change the way we're drafting players. And if that means moving other people out, maybe moving Howie back to his other role of finance and salary cap and stuff like that, and just let other people do the player selection, that I think has to be done. And I think that probably will be done.
Really?
But as far as the coach and the quarterback, no, I think they survive.
I don't think Howie would go for that. I agree with you, and I've been writing that and saying that, but I don't think Howie. I think Howie loves to select players. I think Howie loves the draft. I think Howie sees himself as a personnel guru, and I don't think the job would appeal to him if he's just writing contracts and doing salary cap stuff. I could be wrong, but
Rube, I think you're 100% right. And, you know, and Howie has said that. I mean, he said that you know, that when I wanted to get into football, and I wanted to be a general manager. You know, I didn't want to be just a business side guy. You know, I love the game of football. I love the draft. I want to be the guy who's up at the board picking the players. That was his goal all along. I mean, when he was knocking on every door in the NFL looking for a job, it wasn't to come in and write contracts. It was to come in and work in the front office and, you know, be a general manager, be a wheeler dealer. And I think that's still how he sees himself. And yeah, I mean, if they came to him and said, I don't think it would be in the same way that Chip Kelly just kind of shoved him down the hall. It would just be kind of a reassignment thing. But if that's what Jeff presented him with, that, look, I'm not saying you can't be involved in it, but we're going to bring other people in that are actually going to have the final say. I'm sure Howie wouldn't like it, and I'm sure he'd be unhappy with it. But I mean, at that point, would he make it an ultimatum and say, no, if you're going to do that, then I have to leave? I don't know. But I certainly think it's necessary. I mean, if you look at this team's drafting record over the last 6 years or so, I mean, something's got to change. I mean, the reason that you are where you are now, and the reason you have the roster you have now, is because too many bad decisions have been made over a long period of time. And if you're going to make this thing any better, you know, I think that's the first area that you have to correct.
Yeah. And as much as a blind spot, we talk about Jeff Lurie having this blind spot with Howie Roseman. He does. I think he at least understands that, because I go all the way back to 2016 when they put Howie back in charge. One of the stipulations was that he hire a top personnel guy, and that guy eventually became Joe Douglas. But I mean, back then, we're talking 2016, Jeff Lurie recognized that there was a weakness with Howie, and they at least tried to fill it in with someone else. So he at least knows that it's there. Now, if he makes these other changes and Howie still has final say, does it really matter? I'm not sure. But this idea that Jeff doesn't even see it, that's not true. He sees it. I think we all see it. Whether or not he does something about it is a different story, I guess.
I'm going to sit here and on December 30, 2020 and say Howie will never work for the Eagles if he doesn't have final say in personnel. I just don't. I think he would resign. I think he would step down. I think he would. There might be a. I don't think it would be acrimonious. I think he and Jeffrey have too much respect for each other, but I just don't see him continuing in any role that doesn't include final say over personnel. I could be wrong, but I just don't see it happening.
Well, you may
but
be
I do
right.
agree that it's necessary.
You may be right. I'm sure he would be very unhappy about it. But if you're him and you want to stay in football, and that's really what you want to do, which is to be a personnel guru, and the guy on draft day that you have the last word. Given his track record here, who would hire him?
Great question. The guy was executive of the year 3 years ago, but I'm with you. I don't. It only works here. I mean, his skills don't transfer to another team, and what he did in 2017. And Dave and I were just talking about this on the last podcast. I'm not going to say it was a fluke because they won that Super Bowl and it happened, but he built that team in a really unorthodox way with a lot of older veterans. It's not a sustainable, plan. And he's not a guy that another team would say, let's have him build our team but I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a team out there. I don't know if Howie wants to. He's got a young family. He's lived in this area for, 20 years. I don't know if he would want to go become, a front office guy with the Jaguars or Vikings. I don't even know if the opportunity would be there. But I don't think he would. I don't think he would accept that sort of demotion. It's a fascinating. I can't get into his head. I don't know what he's thinking, but I'd be surprised if he accepts that. I think he would rather almost, leave this for the time being than take that role. I mean, he was humiliated, and like you said, it's different with Chip. I mean, they put out a press release saying he was handling masking tape, for crying out loud. They embarrassed him, but I can't see him being content in a role that didn't include personnel. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves, and I think Jeff knows that, and I think that might play into his decision making.
I'm sure he's aware of it. I'm sure he knows that's how he feels, because Howie talks so openly about it. And you do look back at 2017, and you do look back on the fact that the decisions that they made. It was if anything was the lightning in a bottle aspect of that season, it was that. It was that off season where almost every signing was a home run. Like Garrett Blunt, Chris Long, Jernigan, Patrick Robinson. A guy that, I had why would they have any interest in this guy? Why would they have any interest in this guy? And he comes in and makes one of the biggest plays of the season in the championship game. Every one of those moves, Nick Foles, every one of those moves was, you look back on it and say, was almost inspired. Head to tail. So, yeah, he's got the plaque on his wall as executive of the year. And for that year, he earned it. But you look at that on one side, and then you look at the drafts on the other side and the roster that you have now, and you say, this ain't working. And something's got to be done. And I know Jeff is aware of it. He sees it. And he knows there has to be massive changes in that department. And I think he would like to do it in a way that kept Howie involved, but with the idea that somebody else is going to come in and they're going to have to run this thing. And if there is such a thing as final say in that room, where one person's going to stand up and say, that's the guy we're taking, and you take that away from Howie and you give it to somebody else, I'm sure he's not going to be happy. But if I were the owner, I think that's what I would insist upon.
All right, Ray. Well, we thank you for joining us today and all year.
Yeah, right.
Everyone who was hoping we'd say clean house, that was a really depressing conversation for you to hear. We apologize for that. But Ray, we thank you as always. Happy New Year to you and your family.
Happy New Year to you guys. Always a pleasure. Talk to you next week.
Hey, if you're a football fan, you have to check out the game Sunday Night 7 on the NBC Sports Predictor app. No reason not to play. It's totally free, and it's got $2 million in guaranteed prizes this season with $100,000 up for grabs each and every week. Just make 7 predictions about what's going to happen on Sunday Night Football for your chance to win some serious money. Download the NBC Sports Predictor app or head to NBCSports.com/predictor to make your Sunday Night 7 picks.
Always great to talk to Ray. It's so funny because our plan for that Ray segment every week was really to talk about the upcoming game because he has such a wealth of knowledge about all these opponents. But how early did we just say we can't do that anymore? This is laughable. Yeah. It's been a weird year. We thank him for his time. There is one game left. You're going to have to stay up late to watch it, but there are reasons to watch. And you hit a few of them earlier. I don't know how sentimental people want to get, but it is your last chance to see Deshaun. It is your last chance to see Zach Ertz, most likely in an Eagles uniform. I don't know if that's going to do it for people, but there are other reasons. I mean, there are some young players. I mean, Jalen Hurts, maybe is this his last start, or is this his last start before he's the starter next year? Can he change anything? Like, can he do anything in this game to prove himself? I don't know.
Yeah, and that for me, that's the reason to watch the game is, and yeah, I mean, there's other young guys you want to see, but for me, and there's no real milestones anybody's shooting for. Nobody's close to 1,000 yards. I mean, Miles would need 161 yards for 1,000, which is pretty amazing considering he missed 4 games and gets 13 carries a game. Knowing Doug, Miles will have like a 90-yard run in the first quarter. He'll only need 70 the rest of the game. He'll get like 6 carries, finish with like 983 yards rushing. But who cares about that anyway?
Remember that year Jordan Matthews finished with 997? Yeah. And you were more heartbroken than he was?
He didn't care. He's like, there'll be other years. Well, you know what? There weren't other years. But yeah, I think Jalen for me is really the reason to watch. I'm just
you know what got me? I'm sorry.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I want to see as much Jalen Hurts as possible. This is really valuable experience for him. Yeah. I think we kind of know who he is and what he's all about. I think he's played well for his first 3 starts. I know a lot of people, he's fumbling this, that. Nick Foles fumbled 5 times in his first 3 starts. Jalen's fumbled 6 times. I mean, young quarterbacks fumble. And it's something he's got to work on. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm not going to say this kid's never going to be a starting quarterback because he fumbled in his first 3 starts. He's also made a lot of plays down the field, more than Carson's made, more than I expected him to make. So I just want to see him, I want to see him again. I want to see as much Jalen Hurts as possible. For me, that's the reason to watch. Do I think it'll change the Eagles' plans for the offseason and going into next year? Probably not. Well, if he throws for 5 touchdowns and 400 yards and wins the game, it certainly adds to the body of work that we know about him.
Yeah, it is a weird game though, because if you're an Eagles fan, it's one of those you really got to root for a loss. You do. I mean, and then for a lot of you got to root for that loss.
Yeah,
they need to lose this game.
Yeah, because the draft pick, and you don't want to see Dallas win the division. And it's interesting. I think Doug will, I think they'll do everything they can to lose the game while looking like they're trying to win the game.
Which is what you have to do. I mean, if you have to play like Fletcher, he's banged. He shouldn't play in this game. Anyone who has a little injury should not play in this game.
Yeah, Matt Pryor's actually going to play both left and right tackle.
Yeah, they're going to clone Matt Pryor.
You lose the game. We don't know.
I mean, that is honestly, in seriousnness though, do you worry about the safety of your quarterback? Because if Jordan Mailata can't play, you're going to have Matt Pryor at left tackle and either Brett Toth or maybe we see Prince Tega at right tackle. I mean, it's a little scary.
It is, and I know somebody on Twitter suggested playing Nate Sudfeld, getting him hurt instead of Jalen. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if he can coach that way. I mean, it's a scary prospect, and you know, he would be their fourth tackle to go down.
Yeah.
You know, Diller's probably the healthiest tackle they have at this point. You can bring him off IR.
You cannot.
But it's a concern, you know. So I think Doug will probably run the ball a lot to make sure he doesn't get hurt. How about Jonathan Vilma? Well, Doug's a run first coach.
News to me.
I thought I just like misheard. I didn't actually hear him say that. Like, how do you? I don't want to get too deep into that, but anyway, yeah, it's a concern, and you know, hopefully Jordan's okay. You know, what a cheap shot that was. That was awful. It was
a cheap shot. We'll see what the league has to say about that one. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye Podcast, please, as always, rate, subscribe wherever you get your pods. Happy New Year, everyone. We hope you and your families stay safe, have a good time, and hopefully next year we have a little bit better time overall in football and life.
Eagle Eye Podcast.
We'll see you soon, everyone.